In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
The ruling on the field stands.
We deliver jerseys, funny foam fingers, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
Welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. I'm Jonah Jordan, the Memphis Tigers football beat reporter, and today I'm joined by phone by Drew Hill, who is going to be covering the Cincinnati game for us. How are you doing today, Drew?
I am fantastic. I have made the trip almost the entire way. I'm staying in Louisville, which is where I'm from originally. And then Jeff's going to pick me up. We're going to head up to the Cincinnati-Memphis game here in a few hours. So it's a huge one, a really, really important one.
Yeah, we talked about last week about how important these two games were if Memphis were to lose to South Florida, but we had also talked about how unlikely it was that they lost to South Florida, and then they did, in fact, lose that game. What's the team's outlook right now? What are they thinking? Because that was a brutal one. That's not a good. That was not a good loss. It wasn't one you could lose and still kind of continue in thinking that you could make the tournament without winning the AAC.
Well, the outlook is definitely bleak. That's putting it sort of lightly. It's just hard to picture that when you watch the product on the floor. And I think Penny kind of touched on that in his press conference on Tuesday, just saying, look, bonus points for calling it straight if you're Penny. But he just said, look, the team is low on confidence right now, and I'll boost them up in every way possible. Just to try and get some sort of positivity going in the right direction. And I asked him, are you tougher on them now because you worry about them checking out because they think they're not going to make the tournament or whatnot? And the answer is kind of like, no, I can't really yell and scream because they're young, and he just thinks that this generation's a little bit more sensitive, and so it's all about positivity. And even Boogie Ellis acknowledged, he called it bad energy. There's some, quote, bad energy around the program right now. And that's not what you want to hear, especially when you need to win probably 6 games or 7 games to have a shot at an at-large bid and not have to go into the AAC tournament knowing that you have to win it.
Yeah, but that definitely seems where they are right now. Where are they health-wise? I mean, Lance Thomas and Precious Achiuwa both went down with injuries, kind of left the game there late against South Florida. Where are they health-wise? Are they going to be able to play, or is there anything definitive that you can say one way or the other?
Sure. So health-wise, there's a number of guys dealing with stuff. First, you got Malcolm Dandridge, who sat out the last game with the tweaked knee. He's practiced all week. Thomas, it was just cramps at the end of that South Florida game. From my understanding, it was just like one of those scenarios where when you step with one foot and you cramp up, when you go try and put the weight on the other foot, that starts cramping up. And so you got full body cramps. It's pretty painful, which is why he had to sort of be helped off. And it kind of looked worse than it actually was. He's fine. He's practiced all week. So he will be in the lineup against Cincinnati today. And then Precious is the big question. He went down kind of hard late in that game, fell on his sort of back hip area, and he was sore on Monday, I believe. But he has practiced both Tuesday and Wednesday. And not only did he practice Tuesday, I've heard that he looked really good in practice, like he had a very good practice. But with that being said, I'm sure Memphis would rather keep Cincinnati guessing all the way up until the start of game time. I will be shocked if Precious doesn't play. I'll be really, really surprised if he doesn't play, especially with Memphis posting pictures of him and shoot around. Like, the guy, it looks like he's going to play. But you're not going to hear official word from Memphis until closer to the game time because they would rather Cincinnati be guessing. But if they're paying any attention at all, it looks pretty much like Precious is going to be in the game, and he's going to be ready to go tonight against a pretty tough team.
Yeah, what was the mood like in the gym when he went down? I mean, there had to be some terrified people there. Everybody had to be holding their breath during and after the game. That, man, if Precious is gone, the season changes once again. And they've already had to deal with this several times. I mean, with James going out, James' suspension, and then James leaves, and then DJ goes down, and it just feels like they can't catch a break. Malcolm Dandridge missed last week after tweaking his knee. It just seems like this team cannot catch a break. And do they feel like that, or are they just rolling with the punches? I mean, are they looking at it like, man, we just can't get through this? Like, I've personally never seen anything like this, where a Memphis Tiger team just continuously catches bad break after bad break, and there's not a lot that they can do about it except for respond. What was the mindset after Precious went down?
I mean, when Precious went down in the game, you could hear everybody hold their breath, but it was almost because of the immediate future, that they knew without Precious for those final minutes that they thought that they had no chance. And then they come back and tie the game, and the place gets rowdy and crazy again. And, it's as if he never went down for a couple moments there. Then you lose, and now the outlook is so dark, I guess, for the NCAA tournament, that I feel like there's some people that have just not even worried about it, because at this point you've dealt with so many different things. And if you're Memphis, you don't really have a choice, man. You got to just move on, and you got to say, it's such a cliche and annoying term for everybody to hear, but like the whole next man up thing is like really all that they can do. And it has definitely been disappointing. He's not a guy that hides his emotions. He'll come out and say it, and he said it, and it's tough. And now every single time they have practice, for example, Tyler took a spill in practice on Monday where he got kneed and he fell to the ground, and Tyler's super tough. He's one of the guys that always gets up. He was down for a little bit, and everybody was, holding their breath like, oh my gosh, we cannot have any more injuries. We're just not even going to have enough guys to play with. Tyler turned out to be fine, and it makes for a scary moment after scary moment. And now you're on the ropes, and you've got half of the fan base saying, well, look, I shouldn't divide it into half and half because we don't know exactly what the numbers are, but you've got a lot of people saying, that it's just injuries and there's nothing you can do about it, which I think is kind of the approach you take. And then there's others that are like, it doesn't matter. Like, given our expectations, we're disappointed in the way things are gone. And I think you have a right, and it's kind of fair to say both, but the injuries are out of Memphis's control. They're out of Penny Hardaway's control. So you just got to hope to stay healthier than that. And there's nothing really else you can do.
Now we'll pause for a message from our sponsor.
The Daily Memphian Tigers podcast is brought to you by FedEx. Possibilities. What we deliver by delivering.
All right, Drew. So this is a big week for Memphis. 2 big games. Do you think they can beat Cincinnati on the road? That's obviously the question of the day. I mean, Cincinnati's been playing well. I mean, that game was close-ish for a minute there until a late technical, and then things kind of got out of hand with fouls and whatnot. Do you think they can? I mean, like this, they have to go 2-0 this week. Like they really need to. Do you think they can? I don't think they can go 2-0, but I definitely think they can beat Cincinnati. What do you think?
Do I think they can beat Cincinnati? Yes. Do I think they will beat Cincinnati? If I were a betting man and Vegas says the same thing, I think you would probably say no. Just because Cincinnati, they did just lose to UConn. So they will be very motivated, just like Memphis. They're on the NCAA tournament bubble, so they need a win too. Jaron Cumberland, their best player, who I wrote about yesterday, so that's up on dailymemphian.com. The matchup between him and Lester Quinones today will be a battle within the war. When you calculate all of those things, it doesn't bode well for Memphis necessarily, especially with Cincinnati being at home and knowing that they lost to Memphis the first time around. But can they beat Cincinnati? Of course they can. Just look around the league at all the crazy upsets that have happened over and over and over again. You know, South Florida gave Houston a fight all the way down to the final seconds yesterday at South Florida. So, you know, they played better. And you never know what's going to happen on a given night. So I could totally see Memphis winning both games this week, and I could see them losing both games this week. And you could tell me they did it with 2 blowouts or they got blown out twice, and I could picture that too. It's just so wide open and so crazy that it's hard to imagine any scenario or predict what's going to happen. And if you are predicting at this point, if you're predicting anything other than chaos, then you've been wrong, because it's just been so bananas.
Yeah. So at this point in the season, I mean, we know who the most important player is. I think it's probably obvious that Precious Achiuwa is the Tigers' most important player down the stretch. So who is somebody that would be right behind him? Like, if this person plays well, Memphis can go 2-0 this week, or they can beat Cincinnati. Who are you looking at? Is it Lester Quinones because he has that matchup with Jaron Cumberland, or is there somebody else like a Boogie Ellis who you would be looking to? Who is that second most important player that you want to see come out here and kind of play well?
It is Lester, because of a couple of reasons. One, because he's going to match up with Jaron Cumberland. And the first time that they played against each other, he did a really good job. Jaron Cumberland still finished with 19. When he scores 20 or more, Cincinnati's 8-0. So it seems like a pretty straightforward formula. It's just like the Dylan Brooks formula that we talk about with the Grizzlies every time he scores over 20. So you got to stop him, and it starts with Lester. He's probably going to draw the matchup the most just because he's the tallest. He's a 6'5" guard. When you look at the pick and roll numbers for Jaron Cumberland on offense, he's one of the best in the country at scoring. He's scoring at a super high rate. And then Lester Quinones has held ball handlers in pick and roll situations to 16.7% this year. So something's got to give between the two of them. It's a huge matchup within the game. And so, and on top of that, once you lost DJ with scoring, your best scorer, your highest offensive rated player is Lester. So he's got to give you points. He needs to get up 12 or 13 a game. I think that applies to every game, but especially against Cincinnati on the road where baskets are going to be much harder to find. He would 100% be the guy to watch tonight, and probably at UConn too.
Yeah, so we won't talk in between now and the UConn game, but that game also incredibly important, as we've said. I mean, that UConn team, they lost to SMU recently, but I mean, I still think that they're capable of beating Memphis even on the road. I think that winning at UConn is a little bit more likely than winning at Cincinnati, don't you think?
Yeah. UConn has upset some teams. They've played really well lately. So that is difficult. And especially after already playing one road game and then having to go on the road again. If you lose to Cincinnati tonight and then you go to UConn, you're one of two things either happens. You're either super motivated because you feel like you need to get that win back, that loss back against Cincinnati, or you kind of throw in the towel and you're done. So I think that's where you could get in trouble and lose at UConn. I think if you win, then you're especially motivated going into UConn because you feel the sort of renewed hope. So I think today is probably the most critical of the two, but it's the harder of the two. And I think a lot of what happens over the weekend is actually going to depend on how they play against Cincinnati, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. We've talked a lot about this season, but let's talk about next and those seasons beyond it. What's scheduling looking like? Nobody's really talked about it. What's the schedule for next year and the next look like? Is there any developments, or have there been any rumblings going on? Has Penny talked about it at all at recent availabilities? What's going on with the schedule?
The scheduling is a little bit more tight-lipped than it was in past years. They've discussed some potential SEC opponents. I think Arkansas was one that was rumored last year, that they had already been talking about that. Auburn was a name that had been thrown around. For now, it's a little bit more tight-lipped. Obviously, the biggest trip is the trip to the Bahamas, where there's teams like Duke playing. So scheduling is a little bit more tight-lipped this year, but you would sort of expect that. Is Penny scheduling, And, he's made it clear he wants to play against the tough opponents. You also got to sort of guard. It gives you more chances for good wins early in the season, but you also sort of have to guard against, losing too many early games, because you don't really have a lot of wiggle room once you get into conference, because you're just not going to get that many really big wins in conference, and especially in years like this, when Cincinnati and Houston aren't really what they've been billed as.
Yeah. Has the scheduling been a little bit more difficult? Because when he was hired, Penny talked about he wanted to schedule Michigan State, Duke, Kentucky, the big boys of college basketball. And then we've gotten in this, and now it's Auburn, a bunch of regional people, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Has it been more difficult, or is there just kind of a change in philosophy? Like, hey, we want to play people in the South because that's where we are, and sometimes we recruit against these people. Or has it been, okay, this is kind of plan B?
It's difficult in the sense that when you play these SEC schools, like they're going to play Ole Miss and Tennessee again next year. They feel like they have a lot more to lose than they do to gain. Now, that's different if Memphis is really good, right? If Memphis is really good and it's a chance to get a really good opponent at home, which they were expected to be really good this year, then that's a big boost to your schedule, and it's great. But just depending on where Memphis is, honestly, if they don't live up to some expectations, like Penny said that Patrick Ewing took a rain check basically at Georgetown and told him, like, we need a year. Well, Georgetown seems to be about the same level around the same area as a bubble team like Memphis this year. And so maybe that would have turned out to be a good game. So a lot of it depends on where Memphis is in terms of talent. Like, if you're one of those elite teams, you definitely have a better chance of scheduling one of those elite opponents. But if you're going to play the middle tier teams, they want games against opponents that they think they have a better chance to win. And so it just doesn't, it's very complicated. And I think Penny's sort of learning that. But what else did you expect from Penny to say we want to play the best? Like, he's a guy that claims to be the competitor all the time. And so, if he said anything else, it wouldn't make any sense. So that's what I expect from him.
Yeah. You want to talk a little football?
We can talk a little football. What's going on in the football world?
Memphis is just so we had media day last week, and Memphis is still kind of working through their way through the recruiting period. Memphis brought in a recruit in Darius Kofi. He had originally committed to Duke. Mike McIntyre, Charles Clark had recruited him amongst some other people, and now that those guys moved to Memphis, he had originally signed with Duke, but some stuff happened there, and he ended up at Memphis, and we'll see if he ends up on campus. That's the big question, if he'll make his way to Memphis. But played quarterback, really put up really good stats as a quarterback in Mississippi. But he'll be playing corner here at Memphis. He's a 3-star, really high-ranked kid, probably like the 4th or 5th highest-ranked high school prospect in this class of 2020. But they're very excited. But it's all about the question of, will he get here? Will he get here? But they were very excited to get him.
Well, I think the kids that have either passed on Ole Miss or Ole Miss passed on them have a lot of the time turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah,
wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell is the proof of that. But other than that, not a lot happened. We talked to some assistants last week, and everybody's excited to get going. Everybody's waiting for spring ball. I think the spring game will be April 17th. Spring starts about a month before, but everybody's excited. Football is definitely – football and basketball have kind of switched positions, and it's kind of a strange situation here in Memphis right now where people are like, man, not that they want the basketball season to be over, but they're kind of looking at football like, man, that's going to make me be in a lot better of a mood, which is kind of strange for Memphis fans.
Yeah, I think that's true. And at least, you got the Grizzlies. A lot of fans are Grizzlies fans too, who have been a big surprise and really fun. So at least they got that sort of, if you're a big Tigers fan, that can be your appetizer until you get to football. But again, basketball season is not over yet. It doesn't look good, I think that's fair to say, but there's a long way to go. They still got the AAC tournament. It's anybody's tournament, as the league has proven all year, and you still got several games left with a lot of good opportunities. So you got to win a lot of them, but it's an uphill climb, certainly, but it's not over.
No, they absolutely could go on and win that conference championship. But I think that will wrap things up for today. Drew, you got to get to Cincinnati. You can go follow him tonight and any other night on Twitter at DrewHill_DM and me at _Jonah Jordan. You can find the Daily Memphian podcast anywhere you find your podcasts.
We deliver tickets, team merchandise, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.